going on, vinyl community? Welcome to another video with the Record Spinner. In today's video, I'm going to be talking about some records that you may not know you actually own. Now, what exactly do I mean by that? Aside from seeing an album sleeve up close and knowing what you are buying from a visual standpoint, you can learn more about the records you have by digging beyond the sleeve and looking into the dead wax of the record, which has all kinds of information, such as pressing plant matrix numbers, etchings of who mastered the record, and the record's catalog number. Now, sometimes a label will do a vinyl pressing of an album using already existing metal parts from another vinyl pressing that was done some time ago, and one would be surprised if they found out that what they purchased or own uses metal parts of a pressing that is quite reputable and sometimes expensive. So I figured this would be a rather fun concept to cover in a video and a way to showcase some of the more interesting pieces of my vinyl collection where some records appear to be different pressings altogether. So enough of the chit chat, let's jump into what this video is all about. The first record that came to mind when I thought of this concept was my copy of Creedence Clearwater Revival's Cosmos Factory. Now, this copy has the traditional catalog number of Fantasy 8402, but when you look in the dead wax, you will see these etchings: APP-4516 and KPG/SH at ATM. This indicates that this is the Analog Productions pressing that was mastered by Kevin Gray and Steve Hoffman at Acoustic Mastering. Back in 2002, Analog Productions reissued the entire CCR catalog on vinyl. Kevin and Steve worked with the original master tapes, and the end result was perhaps the best-sounding versions of the CCR catalog you could buy. Now, there was also the etching 7076.1 with a 3 in the parentheses, which indicates that the pressing and metalwork was done at RTI. Flash forward some time later in 2004, Analog Productions releases the Absolute Originals box set, which brings together all of the CCR studio albums together in a limited hand-numbered box set, which was pressed at RTI. A second pressing was done around 2008 and was pressed at Quality Record Pressings. Then in 2014, Analog Productions repressed the CCR catalog, this time individually. And then there's this pressing, which came out around the same time as the Analog Productions repressings in 2014. And I suppose it was a decision made by the label to make sure that this particular album would remain in print to the mainstream buying public, so they did a regular pressing of it. And I guess you could say just the main difference between this pressing and the 2014 Analog Productions pressing is the weight of the vinyl. The Analog Productions pressing comes on 200-gram vinyl, and this one comes on more so standard weight vinyl. Now, it goes without saying that the various Analog Productions pressings are out of print and they command high prices. This pressing, however, goes for around $15, and that's roughly what I paid. So one can buy an Analog Productions pressing for $15, as insane as that sounds. Next up is Nirvana's Nevermind. Now, this pressing has the catalog number DGC-24425, and when you look in the dead wax, you will see these etchings: ORG-032 and BG. This indicates that this is the original recordings group pressing mastered from the original analog tapes by Bernie Grunman. This pressing was done back in 2009, and there is also the etching 18200.1 with a 3 in the parentheses, which indicates that the pressing and metalwork was done at RTI. There was both a standard black vinyl pressing and a colored blue vinyl pressing. Then in 2010 came a second pressing, this time with the etchings 21919 P.USA, which indicates that the pressing was done at Palace. Then in 2013, we got this pressing, which uses the same metal parts from the 2010 second pressing, but with the ORG-032 etchings crossed out and the inclusion of the catalog number DGC-24425. Now, the various ORG pressings are out of print. They command a minimum of $100, but this regular 2013 pressing is easily obtainable for $20 on average, and the sound quality of this pressing is just absolutely mind-blowing. When the drum fill starts and the band kicks right into Teen Spirit, it just explodes explodes and it is right in your face. Now, what is rather intriguing about this pressing is that it states that it is mastered from the original analog tapes. Nirvana's masters are owned by Universal, and of course, in the music community, when one thinks about Universal Music Group, they think of the 2008 Universal fire that destroyed many artists' masters, and of course, one of them being Nirvana's. And bassist Chris Novoselic has said that the Nirvana master tapes are gone forever. Now, considering the fact that the fire took place in 2008 and the ORG pressing was done in 2009, one may say that Bernie Grumman worked with a high-res transfer of the master tape that was done at some point prior to the fire, or he managed to master this pressing long in advance before the fire occurred. It's tough to dig up information of this type to confirm what is exactly true, but if the truth is that this is an all-analog pressing, this is the last ever true all-analog pressing of Nevermind we will ever see, which makes this pressing even more significant. Next up is Foreigners 4. Now, the copy that I have is the one Rhino Records put out as part of their Rocktober campaign back in October of 2016. It is limited to 2,400 copies and comes pressed on, as described, Urgent Red vinyl. Now, this pressing has the catalog number R116999. And when you look in the Deadwax, you will see the catalog number along with this etching, MOVLP 764. This indicates that this is the Music on Vinyl pressing. Now, from what I have noticed, when Mobile Fidelity Sound Lab does a pressing of an album for the American buying market, Music on Vinyl will press the same albums, but for the European buying market. So in 2013, MoFi did a pressing of 4, and Music on Vinyl followed suit. Then in 2015, Rhino put out a standard black vinyl reissue of 4 with the same catalog number as this Rocktober pressing, so they used the Music on Vinyl metal parts, and then they just did a basic colored variant for Rocktober. As to where this was pressed, I am led to believe that it was pressed at Record Industry, which makes the most sense since Music on Vinyl owns the plant and they get all their pressings done there. The Music on Vinyl pressing from 2013 is still widely available, as well as the 2015 Rhino version. The Rocktober version from 2016, not so much. It commands a minimum of $60. I managed to snag mine around the time that it came out for roughly $20. And the same can basically be said about Emerson, Lake and Palmer's album Tarkus. Now, the ELP catalog has been reissued and remastered many times by many different labels, and one of the labels within the US that reissued their catalog once before is Razor and Tie, and the copy that I have of this album is from that label. It has the catalog number 793018334 and when you look in the Deadwax, you will see this stamped 88678-2A MOV268. This indicates that this is the Music on Vinyl pressing and was pressed at Record Industry. There is also an etching that indicates that this pressing was mastered by Greg Moore at Masterpiece Masters. So back in 2011, Music on Vinyl did vinyl reissues of the ELP albums from 1970 to 1974, the golden years basically. And when it came time to do vinyl reissues in the States around 2012, 2013, Razor and Tie had done all new vinyl masterings. Where they were pressed and who mastered them is unknown, but for some reason they used the metal parts from the Music on Vinyl pressing for this album. Perhaps they had the rights to use them, or they couldn't get a chance to do a new cut. Who knows? It's one of those odd things that you often wonder. Now, these various pressings have been superseded by the recent reissues BMG has put out in recent years, but the Music on Vinyl pressing is still obtainable for roughly around $20. But oddly enough, I see copies of the Razor and Tie pressing go for $50, when in reality, it is just simply the Music on Vinyl pressing. Last but not least, we are going to be touching on some Doors stuff. We're going to be focusing on the first 2 Doors albums, their self-titled debut, and Strange Days, and their respective mono mixes. So, with the first album, the first time the mono mix got a vinyl reissue was with the release of the Doors vinyl box by Rhino Records back in 2008, which brought together the 6 main studio albums and the mono mix of the first album as an added bonus and was limited to 12,500 copies. The mono mix had its own catalog number of RHI-74881-7. For Record Store Day 2010, the mono mix was released separately for the first time using the same metal parts from the vinyl box and was limited to 3,000 copies. Flash forward to 2017, and Rhino has released this 50th anniversary set of the first album. This features the stereo and mono mix on CD, along with some live tracks from The Matrix. And then once again, we get a vinyl pressing of the mono mix, once again taken from the vinyl box. Now, this set is limited and numbered, as you can see there, but the figure amount of how many copies were manufactured is unknown. Now, the various vinyl pressings of the mono mix that have been done include the catalog number etched into the Deadwax, along with 16024.1 with a 3 in the parentheses and BG, which indicates that the pressing and metalwork was done at RTI and was mastered by Bernie Grunman. In the case of the 2017 version, the RTI etching only indicates that the metalwork was done there, and there is another etching of B969711-01, which indicates that it was pressed at optimal. Now, some say that the RTI pressings are a bit faulty because there's a lot of surface noise, and the optimal version is a bit of an improvement, but in general, the mono mix of the first album is a bit muddy sounding, so that may attribute to the overall sound quality, but the mono mix that truly shines is of their second album, Strange Days. The mono mix got a vinyl reissue back in 2015 for Record Store Day and was limited and numbered to 12,500 copies. In the Deadwax, you will see the catalog number R1-4014 with another catalog number that was crossed out, which was EKL 74014-A-RE1, which for the most part was the album's original catalog number, but indicates it is a reissue with the RE. There is also a TML-M stamp, which indicates that it was mastered by Doug Sachs. Flash forward 3 years later, and the mono mix gets reissued again for the album's 50th anniversary. This pressing has a slightly revised catalog number of RM1-4014, and they just repressed the Record Store Day version without including the new catalog number. And between both of these pressings, there's no indicator as to where they were pressed, but chances are it was either RTI or Quality Record pressings. So those are some prime examples of some records that you may not know you actually own based on the Deadwax and what metal parts from which pressings were used. Now, the big question I am curious about is, why do labels reuse metal parts from older pressings? They may see it as more of a cost-effective thing to not fork out the money for an engineer to do a new cut of an album. And also, it should be stated that labels like Analog Productions and Original Recordings Group are licensing titles that they want to release from other labels. So I'm sure the labels that own the masters have a hand in these kind of things, and they may be entitled to those metal parts if they want to do a regular pressing for themselves. Now, let's say for Nirvana's Nevermind, you've deciphered the Deadwax of the pressing you bought for $20, and that is the ORG pressing that goes for $100. Does this more affordable pressing take away the hype from owning the $100 version? Of course, certain pressings can obtain their value, whether it's original pressings or out-of-print audiophile reissues, but when the same metal parts are used for a fraction of the value, does it matter which version you buy? That is the big question I am leaving you guys to answer. Please let me know down in the comment section below. I'd love to know. If you enjoyed this video, please go ahead, give it a like, subscribe to the channel. And if you want to support this channel, be sure to check me out on Patreon. See you guys in the next video. And most importantly, keep the records spinning.